It's another week. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So I'm Darren Fink, and this is the lovely
Margie Fink.
And we're with Transfiguring Adoption, and we are coming to you with the 10th, count it, 2 hands, 10th Monday caregiver check-in. And
Has it been that many?
It's been that many. We've done 10 now. So, hey, glad you could join us on Twitter there. Hey, Jack, glad you're here on Facebook. If everyone's wondering, we've got Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook going. But yes, this is our 10th caregiver check-in, and we have this time dedicated to you guys for foster parents, caregivers, adoption experts, anyone. Adoptive parents, so that we can check in and just talk about the issues, questions that you have, and things that you want to talk about. So I just missed who was on Instagram, but someone else was on Instagram. It went fast.
You had a different, it was a different notification.
Oh, it was a different, okay. Well, go ahead, you guys. This is your time, so ask questions and comments whenever you want to. We're live on all of the social media channels. We had a great discussion last week about talking about media and movies and what you allow your kids to see, what like guidelines that you set up for kids not to see and stuff like that. I know we got into a conversation a little while about video games and what video games you allow your foster adoptive kids to play. I know some people even said like the cartoon Ninjago. I guess is it a cartoon and a movie? I know it's a movie. I think Ninjago is also a series, right? But anyway, someone had said that, hey, Oris, someone had said that they don't even let their kids watch that. So, I don't know. Very cool. So anyways, let us know what your questions or anything are. But the first thing I want to, just as like a soft, like, let's get into the waters before we talk about serious stuff. Okay, Oris on YouTube says that Ninjago is a Lego type series on Cartoon Network, but I know it's a movie too, and like I'm totally wanting to go to Legoland and like see the new Ninjago ride. Like that's gonna happen. That's a thing. It's gonna happen. But someone said even their kids like got over like stimulated from that, and so they had to like ban that. So we talked about just different things that kids are watching and playing and doing last time.
How that impacts behavior and how it can be a trauma trigger.
Let's talk about weather just before we get into serious stuff. How is the weather where you guys are at? We're in Knoxville, Tennessee right now, and someone's broken the weather because I'm still wearing my hoodie and we're supposed to be in spring break. So
spring break is over.
Or no, spring break. We're in spring. But it's broken. So on our YouTube channel, we're gonna get ready. We took our family over to Dollywood again to do a bunch of stuff, and we were freezing. It was so cold, like they were so cold. Like, and it's funny because people were asking me like how I am, and I'm like, well, someone's broken the weather over here, so it's bad. It's like it's so cold. I hate cold weather. Yeah, so Oris is talking about the Flamenco Kings at Dollywood. We just put that up there on 40 degrees in Gurnee, Illinois.
Hey, I know where that's at. We're originally from Illinois, so.
Yay for Illinois. Hey, Christy's on here. Hey, Christy. Glad that you could stop by. But yeah, how's the weather? It's 40 degrees in Gurnee. So it sounds like the weather's broken in Illinois right now. It's broken in Knoxville, Tennessee. Yeah, I think the weather's broken everywhere. Like, where are you guys at, and how is your weather doing? So thanks for the heart over there. Someone just gave us a heart. I like those. They're fun.
Baltimore has great weather today.
Boo, Baltimore. Jack, you're gonna rub it in our faces, right? Yeah, we like all the hearts.
It's kind of not that bad today.
It isn't that bad.
It's kind of gray.
But I had to work inside today, so that made it bad.
I think the high was supposed to be like 59 or something. Not horrible.
It's not even spring. Spring has been canceled. The weather's just totally canceled now.
Okay, I keep watching the meme that's going around about winter being angry and like keeps storming out and then coming back in and saying, oh, and another thing.
And one more thing.
That's kind of what happens.
One of these days, Alice.
Okay, so Jack says it's better than the 10 inches of snow last week.
Okay, that's perspective. It's perspective. What? Okay, gorgeous in California. All right, so we want everyone to send their complaint mail to Christy, care of. No, I'm joking. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for humoring me and talking about the weather for a little while. Yeah, again, just comment and ask your questions here. If you guys have any questions about foster care or adoption or things going on in your world concerning those things. I actually just got done doing a workshop this past weekend where I was talking with a bunch of, actually most of them weren't adoptive parents or foster parents. They were just curious about getting involved, about starting foster care. And so I got to talk with them about how to use media and what that looks like and how you're going to be able to walk your kids through trauma and bond with them. So that was a lot of fun. So if you don't have anything you want to talk about, I'll talk about that because that was amazing.
If you have an unedited Flamenco Kings, can you email it to me?
I don't. All I have, everything that I have is up on our YouTube channel. Like from our Dollywood trip, everything's up on our YouTube channel, which if you guys haven't checked out our YouTube channel on the other social medias, you need to check out our YouTube channel and subscribe to it because we have a lot of fun there. But did you have anything you wanted to talk about? Because if you don't, I'm going to talk about some of my stuff from my workshop.
Well, we kind of a couple weeks ago said we were going to talk about what trauma does to the brain functioning and how that impacts children and behavior.
So what do you guys feel like? So yeah, some people asked us to talk about trauma and what that does to kiddos' brains and how it rewires them. When you guys hear trauma, what does everyone like, so that we're on the same page? What does trauma mean to you? Like, what do you guys see as trauma? Like, what would you define that as? Whoa. Hey, I know.
It did something weird. I was like, sorry. We're watching
hey,
all these things.
Sorry, we're watching like all these things in our Facebook, like literally just all these people are signing on to Facebook and our Facebook notification thing just like literally took the screen and went, and we're both like, wow. Like it's the equivalent of like, I don't know, like someone's head revolving and like projectile. Yeah, it was bad. So yeah. Yeah, so what do you guys think trauma is? Like, what would you define trauma as? I would define it as something abnormally, I don't know, horrific, but it would be something abnormal that happens to you that like changes your perspective on life or the way you view things or communicate with people. Like, I don't know, does anyone else like agree with that? Liz is on here, Liz Ford, she probably has a good definition for trauma.
Okay, so we have one, I think of a serious injury that is hard to get fixed, but it will over time.
Ooh, I like that because over time, because it's not an easy, it can be healed, but it's it's gonna leave a scar.
Well, that's more like the physical trauma, but then there's too like the, like one thing that people don't think a whole lot about is the trauma pre-birth. So one of the things that we talk about is with developmental trauma and trauma that impacts children is there are 6 major risk factors basically for trauma rewiring the brain. And
before we get too far into this, totally stop us if we're getting too nerdy science with this because we'll science out on the, and I'm not a science, I'm an art major. So
but I'm the psychology.
She's a psychology major. Here, so like sometimes we talk about this stuff and we don't realize how sciencey and dorky we're getting with it until people are like, whoa, you're using the words there. Like, let's stop with the words and maybe a little bit more fun.
Okay, so let's back up just a little bit with trauma. Like one thing that a lot of people have heard about is the fight, flight, or freeze response. So like if something's happening and it's stressful, the body can kind of make you go into 3 different reactions where you fight it out or you flight, which is go away. Okay, school counselor. Cool, awesome. Or freeze, like you just kind of shut down. You don't react, like, and you're not.
That's kind of like almost like an animal. Like if you put them like a squirrel or a mouse, like if you get them pinned in a corner, like I know I've had people explain it to me like that, like professors and stuff, that like if you hold on a second. Sorry, Facebook, I had a call come in. But if you have a mouse put in a corner, like and a cat's coming at them, they're either going to just totally freeze and they're going to just stop and just do nothing and just stare and their heart's going to be racing, or they're going to actually like jump at the cat and try to defend themselves and attack.
Or they're going to run away.
Or they're going to run away and try to get away. So those are the 3 responses that they might have.
And that's kind of something that is in the primitive part of the brain. So, I mean, animals have that stress response, and the primitive part of our brain is actually like kind of in the base, in the back. So when children who've experienced a lot of trauma and they have that stress response, when that gets triggered, often a lot more and a lot in different circumstances than a child who is developed normally in a kind of typical situation. So when I'm talking about that stress, that trauma, rewiring the brain, there's chemicals, neurotransmitters, hormones, all those things. My one dog loves chasing squirrels, and they always run. Okay, side funny note. This has nothing to do with trauma. When I was a kid, we had squirrels that lived in the backyard, and they would sit up in the tree and throw acorns down at our dog, and just like sit up there. And it was like they were like laughing at the dog, just teasing it.
Okay, and let's put that in with trauma though. Like trauma, it would be flight, fright, or freeze.
Oh, they're fighting.
It might not even be fighting. I think they were well-developed squirrels, and they'd formed a plan, right? Like they knew the dog couldn't get. They threw. It was like Chip and Dale, like they were throwing like nuts at Pluto and like totally attacking. So yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So if you're joining us right now, some people just joined us on Instagram and Twitter. If you're joining us, we're talking about trauma and what it does to kiddos' brains.
Yeah. So when I was talking about the 6 different things that can cause the brain to kind of rewire because of trauma. So 3 of those actually happen even in a birth family. So stressful pregnancy. So if a mom is stressed out, those stress hormones actually impact the child's brain, developing brain in her womb. So, and then a stressful delivery. So if there's something that happens during delivery where it's not just your typical delivery, there's some problems. And then right after birth, hospitalization where they might be separated from the primary caregiver. So those 3 things can happen because oftentimes people think if we foster a child from the hospital or if we adopt a child from the hospital, that child hasn't experienced trauma, so their brain's not going to be impacted. But the reality is 3 of those major 6 risk factors can actually happen if you get a child immediately from the hospital.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what else do you have to say about it?
So basically what happens then when a child has had trauma during their development early on, that impacts their brain. And the big thing that it really impacts is the executive functioning. We were talking about how the fight, flight, or freeze, that's kind of the primitive part of your brain. It's in the back of your brainstem. But our executive functioning, that's like our reasoning, logic, and we can think through things. That happens in the executive functioning part of our brain, which is up here. So when a child gets triggered by stress, something happens and it kind of triggers that trauma, their brain just switches off back to that primitive response. So we are in the process of selling our house, so a lot of my go-to books are actually packed. But
hey, thanks for the thumbs up.
I picked this one up that was one of the few that are still left on our shelves. This has actually been reviewed on our website. It's Parenting Strategies to Help Adopted and Fostered Children with Their Behavior.
I think they saw it on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm kind of doing the rounds.
It's like show and tell, like the teacher, like show and tell.
So it's Trauma-Informed Guidance and Action Charts by Christine Gordon. And it was reviewed on our website. And so I just picked it up. I haven't read it yet. I want to read it. So the book talks about how trauma impacts behavior. And sorry, I'm flipping. I meant to bookmark the page. But it's talking about executive functioning in this one part. Developmental trauma and executive functioning difficulties is one of the chapters. And it talks about how there's this classification of executive skills, and there's this behavior rating inventory of executive functioning called BRIEF. So there's 8 different areas of executive functioning that they're kind of talking about in here that affect behavior. That's behavior inhibition. So if you have the ability to be inhibited and think through your behaviors before you do it, ability to shift from one task to another, emotional control, initiation skills, working memory, the ability to plan and organize, the ability to organize one's materials, and the ability to self-monitor. So those are all things that in different ways come out in our, that we see in our children. So the whole end section of the book is basically charts. And so, okay, I realize that there's a glare on some of you and you can't see it at all.
Almost all of them. I was looking and like no one saw it.
Yeah, I know.
So
basically,
ooh, I like that name. Smile, Happy, Love, Cools on Transfiguring Adoption on Instagram. Hi. Hello.
So it goes through different
We
behaviors.
have a question on YouTube here too when you get a breath.
So it goes through different behaviors that are often seen in traumatized children. And just some of them, I'll just name a few of them: accepting blame and responsibility, completing tasks, consequences, constant fiddling, disrupting others, stealing, lying, food issues, homework issues. So it has each of these behaviors, and then it shows what the observed behavior is, the attachment and developmental trauma issue, what you can do, what the triggers are, what you can do about them, and then further reflection. So I really like this setup. Like I said, I haven't read this yet, but I like the way it's laid out because
our reviewer reviewed it on our website though. But we have a question on YouTube. So for those of you that just joined us, we're talking about trauma and what it does to kiddos' brains. And just so you know, our Monday caregiver check-ins, this is your time. So you ask questions or comment or whatever, because Margie and I will stop talking about what we're just talking, so you're not staring at us, like not talking about anything, but we will talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. And this was actually something someone 2 weeks ago wanted to talk about, was what does trauma do to kiddos' brains? So that's why we're talking about it. So on Facebook, we have someone saying that they have a cousin that was an emergency C-section, and would that fall under trauma? I would say yes.
Well, and especially it says she came out at 1 pound, 10 ounce. So I'm assuming.
Hey, Kyle.
Let's see. She's fully grown 5-year-old now, no health issues. Let's see. She fell off a bed at 3 and broke her clavicle.
Hey, Rachel.
Okay. So
that would be trauma.
So that's definitely trauma.
See,
it depends on how long if there was distress, how long it was. But there would definitely be some chemicals going on there that could impact functioning. But I think for a child who comes at 1 pound, 10 ounce, the larger trauma would be probably the long hospitalization. That impacts just how often they're responded to, how much touch they get. There's so much that happens right here. So when you've got a newborn and that distance between your eyes and their eyes, that's basically about the infant's range of sight is to their parent's face when they're in the nook of your arm. And so there's a lot of attachment, a lot of growth in the brain and things that happen right there. So if you have a child who's been hospitalized for quite some time, right at birth, there's some things that can be impacted by that.
Well, and I think it's interesting.
Every situation is different. Let's see.
I think it's interesting too, because all the stuff that we're talking about, we're relaying it to foster parents or foster kids and adoptive kids, but trauma is trauma. So even if you have a kiddo that's going through a lot of chronic trauma because there's their parents are going through a bad divorce, or like maybe there's physical abuse in a marriage or something like that, like the stuff that we're talking about is going to relay and it's going to relate to those children as well. It's not like...
I know once we were talking to an educator who was kind of saying, well, I don't have a lot of because we were talking about how that trauma can impact the brain and how that affects learning and what that looks like at school. So different strategies and interventions that teachers can use for kids who've had complex developmental trauma. And she kind of said, well, I don't really have a lot of those kids. But then she started thinking about it and she's like, well, I have a lot of refugee kids and I have these types of kids and she's like, they're all coming from trauma. She's got kids who have come from other countries who were in war zones. And that's definitely trauma. That's definitely going to impact how their brain functions and their behavior. Every child is different. Their resiliency, their kind of like threshold for stress is different. And kind of who they have around them when they experience trauma. So Like the child that fell off the bed at 3 and broke her clavicle, we actually had the same thing happen to one of our kiddos in the last couple of years.
Scared me to death.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
But I think in that situation, when you have the nurturing caregivers that are right there who immediately come to the child and they walk through the trauma with them, it can have a different result.
You know, and one thing
trauma has a lot to do with as you get older, whether something might be traumatic to one person isn't necessarily traumatic to another. So it depends on the situation a lot.
Do you know one thing that came out when you were talking was you said so we're talking, for those of you that just joined us, we're talking about how trauma affects a kiddo's brain, especially foster and adoptive kids. And Margie was just talking about the primitive, like, stress and trauma can take them back from working in this front part of the brain where they can work out all the reasoning and the higher thinking, and it takes them back to a more primitive part of the brain. It's not the cerebellum. What is that back here? Is that the cerebellum? Yeah, because this is the cerebral cortex, and this would be the cerebellum. So it's taken them back.
All my books with the good pictures and stuff.
But it's taken them back here, and you said that they can't take blame. And that's one thing as parents, we want them to, like, we want to teach them that. We want them to take that blame, darn it. Like, we just saw you hit that kid. You better say you're sorry. Like, I mean, that's one thing. Just like, I hear parents, I mean, we go to amusement parks. I hear parents all the time wanting their kids to take the blame. Like, if they did something, they want them to say, sorry, I did that. But with our kids.
I got distracted. I was reading Rachel's. Even the action of removing a child from a family of origin is traumatic, even under age 1. Yeah. Even there's a lot of science now that shows that even if a child never, like, a woman delivers a child and they take the child at birth and they never actually physically touch their mom, that it has and that baby grieves, and it does have an impact.
So I got a question on YouTube. So now I'm curious, can pets like dogs and cats have the same kind of trauma a human can have? Like, if a human breaks his leg and a dog does it, it's the same kind of trauma, or no? So I don't know. What do you guys think? Are our pets, do our pets go through the same thing? Like, could that, I mean, I know I've heard a lot of people, they actually come to me at conventions and stuff and they apologize they say, because they've never had kids, but they've had a puppy. And they said, hey, adoption options here. Hey guys. They apologize because they're like, I'm sorry, I'm comparing, it seems like I'm comparing a kid to a dog, but they're like, I'm not. This is what I've seen. I think there is some similarities there because they're both living beings, but I think at some point it's going to part ways because you have a human being that's higher functioning and, in my opinion, worth.
Well, there's more executive functioning that goes on in a human's brain. But obviously, I mean, our pets can grieve. Like, you see it happening, and you see
and they can go through trauma.
Certainly, like, there are, shelter animals that, the shelter will say, well, this animal responds this way, we live by this type of person and stuff, because the dog responds a certain way when this type of person is around. So certainly there's some lasting effects of trauma on pets.
I just don't think, I think where you part ways with that is where eventually a child can be, like, we can be taken through therapy and we can reason through things and we can kind of break cycles. I think a pet can break cycles, but I think it's on a more primitive level. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that goes through with a child and like us too, like as adults. Like, I think we can be taken through and like shown through repetitiveness that like no one's going to hurt you in this situation, no one's going to hurt you in this situation. But at some point too, like we're able to just reason without that repetition too, and just be like, that happened a long time ago, that it was in this situation where a cat or a dog's
I think
not.
so. Let's see. My child, adopted son 12, just wrote a note at school that I'm going to kill my mom in her sleep. How do I get other adults to take my concerns seriously?
Ooh, wow. Hold on. Let me go back again. So we're gonna put a pinhole. We're gonna pause this conversation about trauma and the pet comparison. So again, we have a question on Facebook. An adopted son, age 12, just wrote a note at school that I'm going to kill my mom in her sleep. How do I get other adults to take my concerns seriously? What would you, everyone else can vote in too on that one. What would you say?
Hold on, there's another comment too that I
there was another comment.
There's another comment that we can't read the whole thing there. That's why I was trying to see.
But that was related with the other thing though.
Okay.
That was related to earlier. So I'm going to kill my mom. Wrote the note, I'm going to kill my mom in her sleep. How do I get other adults to take my concerns seriously?
I'm going to say that's rough. And I don't know your full situation. I know a lot of times with kids who've been adopted, who have been through trauma and such, they can, especially if there's any kind of attachment difficulties, it can be very difficult for other adults to understand, because those children can be very, Kyle's asking what was the context of the note. I will say, finishing off what I was saying, if there's any kind of attachment difficulties, a lot of times we see our children react very differently to us, the attachment figure, than they do to people in the community, whether that's school or church or in the mall or whatever. Severe trauma and neglect. Yes. How old was the child when he came to you?
And I think that's one thing too, taking, some adults might not take it seriously because they don't, I mean, that's why we're having this discussion group every Monday too, is just to have support and to check in with each other. They might not, I would definitely say that's something that you need to seek out a professional counselor on.
10 years old.
10 years old.
It's been home 2 years. Definitely, yeah, I would say definitely, are you working with a therapist, someone who understands trauma and attachment and all of that is what you need in that situation. What kind of, I would say definitely at home, getting safety plans in place, making sure that that's not able to happen.
I would say definitely being safer than sorry, that you definitely need, I mean, if this is something that you're taking seriously, that they're writing that they are out to hurt and harm someone, you definitely need to seek out professional help. That needs to be done ASAP.
Yeah, like one thing that we've done in the past when we've had to put safety plans in place, not in the same situation, but where we had to work with school and other adults to enforce that safety plan to make sure that the child and others around the children were always safe, was we had an informed therapist who understood trauma, understood attachment and all of that, to go ahead, and we developed the safety plan with the therapist, and then we were able to take that to other adults that interacted with the child, and say, look, this professional is saying this is serious, this is what needs to be done to keep everybody safe.
I don't know, to be quite honest, again, if you're just joining us, someone's asking what they should do if, like they have an adopted 12-year-old son, was it, that wrote a note saying that they wanted to kill their mom. What do they need to do? I guess is that the other thing I need to ask too, is that, did they mean their biological mother or did they mean you? Like, either way, I think a professional, well, I mean, in my head, I'm thinking that they're writing the note and it's you, the adoptive mother, they're writing it to, and they're coming home to you. And so I'm thinking,
no, he means,
okay, he means mean. Yeah, you definitely need to seek out, you need to put in some safety for you and for them, because they don't want to do something they're going to regret later on down the road. I would say, and again, everything that we're saying here is just to help and encourage and to give some advice. So it's definitely not medical or legal or any other advice, but I would say you need to get a hold of a therapist. Definitely, like if there's school teachers you can talk to, any professionals like school teachers or anything like that are going to take this seriously. They're not going to say that you're full of it or anything like that.
I wouldn't say that, because I would say in situations, we've gone to the school in different cases and said, this is what's going on at home. And they're like, really? No way. Like, this is a totally different child that we're talking about. And really, we've seen that. Okay. So biological brother is their as well, and adopted 2.5-year-old girl. Let me know. We are actually going to have to pop off here because he has to take a child to work, and I have to go to work, and we have, so we're going to have to cut a little bit short today. We will definitely continue all these.
So I can still get him to work in about 10,
not with traffic right now.
Yeah, I can. I'll be fine. So like I'm curious what Rachel and Kyle are on here. I'm curious what they have to say about that.
Yeah, totally agree.
They're good at school. Okay. Yeah.
So that is where it's hard to get other adults to kind of understand, because they do respond so differently at school. They can be so charming and so out to please and so well behaved, and then come home and kind of let loose on us as the attachment figures, who are we're seen as a threat in a way. In terms of attachment and
the other thing you might check on is not only a therapist, but I would also check with if you have any post-adoption services in your area. Post-adoption services are going to be very sympathetic because this isn't abnormal. Right. I wish I could say that this was really abnormal what you're saying, but it's not. And so, but yeah, just I can't stress it enough that probably like right now you need to be calling a therapist and saying this is the issue.
We've got a couple other professionals online in different places here. If you let us know, like you can shoot me an email, Margie@transfiguringadoption.com. Spoke a million times him standing over me. I ask him what's wrong. He says nothing. Yeah, I would strongly encourage to like Lowe's or Walmart, like the $10 door alarms, getting those on, making sure you've got any kind of things that we use as weapons locked up or inaccessible in some way. It
sounds like there's something going on there though, and there's therapy that's needed. But first thing first is you need to make sure that you're safe and everyone in the house is safe. And so you really need to get a hold. That's why I'm saying, I can't stress enough, you need to go to hold of a therapist now. If you think it's something even more.
Let us know, like if you email me and tell me where you're at, I might be able to help you find services if possible. If you kind of don't know. If it's
something more severe though, you need to get a hold of even law enforcement or hospital. And make them aware of the situation. Like if it's, I'm not sure how severe it is. I just know that they're writing the note. But again, you're saying that you're waking up with this kiddo standing over top of you. So I'm not sure the level of severity there. So again, it's better to be safe than sorry. So if this is like a very serious threat that you're afraid something's going to happen, definitely you need to call
like mobile crisis,
law enforcement, hospital, just so that everyone's safe. Because again, you want to be safe and you don't want this kiddo to do something that they're going to regret and have to live with for the rest of their life.
He was refused from hospital. Okay.
They're in a safe and locked up. Okay. So, he was refused from the hospital. Definitely get in touch with the therapist, though. This is not something that's unusual or weird. I don't think, I'm not saying not to I'm not making light. Who is a professional in the industry says get into a therapy office to discuss the situation. Check your subsidy paperwork for post-adoption services. If you're in the Knoxville, Tennessee area, Harmony.
Well, Harmony is throughout Tennessee.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Where are you at, Wendy? That'll help get kind of a starting point.
But unfortunately, too, like with trauma and everything that we were talking about, this kiddo has been through probably some weird stuff, and they need the help, and they're going to need a professional to help you and him get them through that. That's unfortunate that it refused.
Door alarms would help you to sleep better.
Not Michigan. Okay, so Michigan, there is. Are you familiar with a Facebook group that's in Michigan? There's actually a foster and adoption group in Michigan. And I'm trying to think of what they are called. I believe it's AFSN, Adoptive Family Support Network, ASFN.
And it says Michigan Village. We actually know some of the people that are part of that with their staff. So Yes, good.
Yeah, just joined it.
Good.
Definitely mention that on there.
Segans, Nick and
Kristen Segan, or Kristen actually works for them. Spelled Seguins.
Well,
or
no,
Segan. Right. I'm thinking both of them together. Yeah, Wendy, that's a rough call, and gosh, you're doing great. You're doing all the right things that I can think of. Hey, Brandy, glad you could join us. Yeah, let Margie, again, her email is Margie, MARGIE @transfiguringadoption.com. Let her know how everything turns out. Keep us apprised of that. But again, I just, it is scary. It's very scary.
Definitely talk to the Segans, because they are closer to you. They'll know more what is available in your area than, because us being in Tennessee, don't know what everything you have access to there.
Definitely,
they're big on advocating, and they've fought some hard fights. So hopefully they can help you out. Yeah, and being the only adult in the home.
Yeah,
that's one thing. I don't know how people do it. I know if one of us is gone, like that, not having someone to tag off really is really hard.
Definitely get in touch with Kristen and Nick through the AFSN group. Ask them what to do. I would say it is scary. You're doing everything right, though. You're doing what you need to do. So I know it's not very comforting, but take comfort in that you're doing what you need to do and keeping your home safe. Making sure everyone's safe, that including you, is the first thing that you need to do. And then after that, you definitely, therapy needs to happen. Yeah. So, gosh, Wendy, I wish we could be there and help you a little bit more, but that's...
Yeah, because I know, like, Harmony in Tennessee does a lot of post-adopt, and you can get in as crisis, and they come into your home and do post-adopt type services. They have an ASAP program, which is adoption support and preservation. So definitely talk to the Segans. I hope they can help you out. Darren's actually send some messages to Kristen so that she'll be on the lookout. Because that is a rough situation.
Yeah, that is rough. And I think the hard part, I think how it relates to what we were talking about with trauma, is that unfortunately these kids have been through so much chronic trauma that it has it's rewired their brains, so they're not so where we might do a timeout with kids in normal situations, it's going to freak these kids out because they've been neglected and abused, right?
Yeah, I mean, the back of this book starts out, although traumatized children rarely respond to traditional parenting strategies, there are proven developmental reparenting techniques. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand, is the typical traditional parenting techniques backfire with a lot of kids who've been through trauma. So
okay. So yeah, I just, Wendy, just so you know, I messaged Kristen Segan, who is with, what was that called? AFSN in Michigan. And so she might not be able to answer right now, but she is watching for you on there. So definitely reach out to her and let her know. So we are actually going to have to jump off of here, you guys, because we're getting to our time that we have to jump off. And like Margie said, we have some work and other obligations that we have to get to. I can try to think of anything that we need to let people know about. Coming up soon, in a month or two, we are going to be running our second annual Best Foster Parent in the Nation Award on Transfiguring Adoption. So be on the lookout for that and be ready to nominate people for that. Also, we still have spots open for our Universal Studios Orlando trip. So go check that out at transfiguringadoption.com/vacation. To everyone that joined us today, thank you so much for joining us. Just like this situation where Wendy's been talking with us, we know you guys are dealing with such heavy issues. They might not be as heavy as that, but they seem heavy in your world, and that we totally get that and we understand that. thank you so much for all that you're doing. As foster and adoptive parents, you are not told enough how great of a job you're doing, and what you have done today has made a difference, whether you realize it or not. Like, you are making a huge difference in a child's life and in your life, and you're taking on huge odds that are sometimes scary. So thank you so much for what you do. You're amazing. Just doing this is, I feel like, isn't even very supportive, but we're trying to do something to support you guys and encourage you. For everyone that's not a foster adoptive parent that came on here just to support caregivers, thank you so much, because like you could hear from Wendy, she's having some real issues, and just having a community around her, knowing that there are people out there that care about her and are worried for her and thinking about her, is huge. Very huge, and there aren't enough people out there to support caregivers. So thank you so much for all that you do to support. Again, my name is Darren Fink. This is the lovely Margie Fink, and we're Transfiguring Adoption. We hope that we are helping you to nurture or grow your foster or adoptive family. We'll see everyone next week at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Talk to you guys later. Goodbye, Facebook.
Bye, Twitter.
And goodbye, YouTube.
Bye, Instagram.